Welcome into the Cover 5 podcast, where we will be breaking down 5 games from a DFS perspective. I am your host. You can find me over on X, Twitter, at Jordan Vanek DFS. As always, I am joined by my co-host at HiLoFF over there on Twitter. Hilo, we've got a ton of late injuries that are going to adjust this slate. Personally, last weekend was a great one. I think this slate is starting to become my favorite of the year. How are you feeling about the overall slate?
Well, first of all, before we get into that, man, I can't believe that you can wear that hat today after that performance last night. I'm just kidding, man. We kid. You did well to maintain or to keep on pace with my hometown Cardinals for the top overall pick. So that's fun. Uh, anyway, just kidding, because you don't have it. Sorry. Sorry. I had to. Anyway, I was rooting. All my friends here last night, we were rooting for a Panthers win so that we could have a game in hand for the first overall pick. Anyway, no, dude, this slate is shaping up to be very interesting. We just talked about, before we jumped on here, Nico Collins. He was a limited showing on Wednesday, DNP Thursday, Friday. That just popped. So he's looking extremely unlikely. We obviously have T. Higgins, who got injured in Wednesday's practice as well. We actually have a one-game sample size of how the Bengals handled a game without T. Higgins this year. Jamar Chase saw 19 targets. That was pretty fun. Trent Irwin came in, played 76% of the offensive snaps. That's going to be fun. There's a lot of moving pieces. And not to mention the 20 other names that are on the Houston Texans injury report as well. They have issues in the secondary. Derek Stingley is attempting to come back, limited showing on Thursday. All kinds of injuries there. Laramie Tunzel was on the injury report as well. Robert Woods, Dameon Pierce. There's a lot going on this slate. And I think when we look about like how that is going to affect how players build on the slate, up until today, there wasn't a ton of projectable value on the slate. So you were unlikely to see guys settle on ownership on players like Amon-Ra St. Brown, like Jamar Chase is going to be owned. But this upper echelon of player pricing, CeeDee Lamb, Christian McCaffrey, we're probably going to see muted ownership because there wasn't the presence of that projectable value. Now, with guys like Trent Irwin, maybe Andre Yoshivas, guys like Tyler Boyd, it could open some things up. So I think it's going to, if you've looked at ownership projections to this point, Friday morning, throw those out the window because they're going to change a ton with these injuries kind of popping up everywhere.
Yeah, again, this is an injury-filled slate, and you're going to have to adapt. It's still got a ton of players on the way, obviously. We are doing the show at 1 p.m. Eastern on Friday, so there's still some news. Be sure to check out the articles we have coming out on the weekend and the top plays that will be released Saturday as well. But before we get into it, just so you guys are aware, the 5 games we will be breaking down: Tennessee at Tampa Bay, Houston at Cincy, 49ers at Jacksonville, Washington at Seattle, Detroit at LAC, which has the highest total on the entire slate, as well as giving our favorite slate breaker and our favorite value overall on the entire weekend. Hilo, I'm going to kick it off to you. First game you chose, Tennessee and Tampa Bay. When I saw it hit, I was like, I don't like it. But the more I've looked into it, I think I know where you're heading, but I'm curious to see where you're at. So tell me what you like about it.
Yeah, from a likeliest, like what is likeliest to happen here is the game is likeliest to want, or how do I phrase this? The Tennessee Titans are going to want to control this game, shorten it, and send it into the fourth quarter as a close game. That's just kind of their MO. So whether or not that can happen depends on how Derrick Henry is in this spot. How Derrick Henry is likely to be in this spot depends on Vita Vea's health. So it's this kind of like the snowball effect keeps building in this game environment. Vita Vea has practiced for both days and as of Thursday, because I haven't seen their practice report for Friday yet, after his first game back after missing week 8 for the Buccaneers. He's so important to this defense because he is that immovable object at nose tackle against the run. And that allows this defense, the Tampa defense, to play their elevated rates of zone coverage. It allows them to get unique in their blitzes and how they handle a game plan defensively. So Vita Vea is extremely important. So backing that up, the matchup on paper is very, very poor for Derrick Henry, a guy who has struggled in efficiency with their state of their offensive line. And oh, by the way, we have Will Levis, who is starting his third consecutive NFL game. And this one is not out of necessity. This one is not, I don't know if we can say he's earned it yet, but they're just going with Will Levis.
No, I would say he has. Just from the arm talent perspective, what's the draw to Tannehill? Like,
there isn't.
He's
noodle.
What I was gonna say is like, is he the franchise guy? No, but if you had that quarterback room after watching the 2 games of Will Levis, there is no way you go back, right? Like, you would agree with that?
No.
Yes.
I know 100%.
Yeah, he's not
was just
starting
saying
because he's a great quarterback. He's starting because he is the best one they've currently got.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, yeah, he threw 4 touchdowns in his first NFL game. There was the OPI play. There was all kinds of different things that went into that. And then he kind of came crashing back down to earth with 0 touchdowns and a pick in game 2 against the Steelers, who he kind of carved up the Falcons, which are this zone heavy, forcing you to make your reads and progressions type team. And then going against the Steelers defense, who plays a lot more man coverage. Which is typically easier for a rookie quarterback to transition to the NFL game, is against man, as opposed to the unique looks that zone kind of gives them. Anyway, that discussion notwithstanding, there's very, very clear upside here from both passing games. We're seeing some, or I expect to see some ownership on Rachaad White after he finished as the RB1 overall on the slate last weekend. I expect there to be some hangover, some lag effect on him. But when you look at like how this game erupts, it's likeliest to come through a guy like Mike Evans in a downfield role, because that would be the driving factor that kind of opens up the Titans away from being able to control the game environment on the ground. So your skinny correlations of like Mike Evans and DeAndre Hopkins, extremely viable. But I think the most interesting piece from this game is a guy in Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. We have Treylon Burks. Listen, you shut your mouth and you listen to me. I'm just kidding. You're muted.
I've got a funny story about him. I'll get to that after. You can continue.
Okay. Is this a college day story?
No. This is a story between me and one of my buddies, Jeff. Basically, long story short, I was like, there's no way you could play Nick Westbrook-Ikhine in this matchup. You should be playing X, Y, and Z. And Nick Westbrook-Ikhine ended up catching a touchdown. And it was like his one catch. It was a one catch, 30-yard broken play. I was like, you're kidding me. But continue.
All right. So with Treylon Burks out, and Treylon Burks is not just like this X-type wide receiver that they tried to pigeonhole him into in his rookie season. And he's not just this wide receiver that is running downfield routes. He has a rather robust route tree. So when that is absent in a lineup, we have a guy like Nick Westbrook-Ikhine who is already playing snaps, but is now going to be playing almost every snap. Kyle Phillips is not the answer here, y'all. He's going to play in the slot, but this is already an offense that does not utilize 11 personnel at an elevated rate. So it's going to be DeAndre Hopkins and it's going to be Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. And the thing that is so interesting about Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is he is the guy that they're using in the downfield routes. He has a high percentage of his routes that are coming on the 7 to 9. And when you talk about how to exploit the Tampa defense, that is where we want to be doing it, because they're blitzing at an elevated rate. And when they blitz, it is bringing them into man coverage at a higher rate. And they're not able to generate pressure at a rate equivalent to their blitz rate. So they have a lot of empty blitzes. And that is important against a rookie quarterback, because like we saw last week with CJ Stroud, if you're blitzing and not hitting home, it makes things easier from a progressions and trying to find and read a defense. So that is very interesting to me from this spot. A guy like Nick Westbrook-Ikhine probably going to be playing around 80% of the offensive snaps here, because even DeAndre Hopkins isn't getting over 80% on a weekly basis in this offense. But if he's able to connect, like you alluded to, on a downfield pass in this role, in this offense, in this matchup, we know that Derrick Henry could struggle to get going on the ground. Very, very interesting at only 3,400. So we talked about in the opening the fact that it's kind of hard to find projectable value on this slate. Nick Westbrook-Akine and some of the guys from the Bengals that we'll talk to here shortly kind of give you the freedom to be able to approach and reach these pay-up type options.
I don't know if I'm going to get to Nick Westbrook-Akine, but I will say we're in a spot where we have run defenses that are elite. Obviously, Vita Vea's health is a big part of that. But then we have pass defenses that aren't very good. And we have injuries to their pass defenses, like Sean Murphy-Bunting, who was with Tampa Bay and is now with Tennessee. So, like, it's an easy spot where it's like, well, Mike Evans can get the deep ball. And we know Tennessee wants to run the ball. Obviously, Tennessee is not going to be a great team if Vita Vea is out there. So it's like, well, Mike Evans, D-Hop, Mike Evans, Nick Westbrook-Akine, like these receivers have a chance to kind of spark this game to being higher point total and give you some volume in it. The Tampa Bay side, it reminds me of week 2 Chargers Titans, where the Chargers aren't the same run defense as obviously Tampa Bay, but the Chargers run defense has actually been pretty good in recent weeks now that they're fully healthy. But from the Tampa Bay side of things, Chris Godwin's, Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, that I was into that stack with obviously Justin Herbert, who's a better quarterback, but like, why wouldn't I be into that stack in this matchup? Which I would say that Mike Evans is a better deep threat than Mike Williams, and Chris Godwin isn't Keenan Allen, but he's still very productive. So I don't mind Baker at actually a quarterback at his price. If you want to game stack this, obviously Nick Westbrook-Akine would really open things up from a salary perspective and continue that correlation. So I'm not opposed to him in a Baker stack. So that's kind of how I'm approaching it. You got 2 run defenses that are elite, pass defenses aren't good. So has a spot to have big plays. It's just whether or not the quarterbacks can actually hit these down the field targets. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, the injuries on the back end for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We know that Antoine Winfield is kind of the commander of this defense in the back as that kind of strong safety. But Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean are on the injury report, and those are the 2 starting cornerbacks for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That is likely to force them to play Zion McCollum, who saw a bunch of work in the early portions of the season when Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean were in and out of the lineup. And we kind of saw him be the point of exploitation for opposing offenses this season. So I like the fact that you can play. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins scored the 3 touchdowns 2 weeks ago, then came back and backed that up with 11 targets last week. So he's very clearly the guy that kind of Will Levis is looking to. And that makes sense because he's kind of this body control type wide receiver, and he's able to, beyond the OPI, the very clear OPI touchdown that he had, he's able to win in tighter coverages. So both him, Nick Westbrook-Akine, Mike Evans, a little bit less so Rachaad White. I was on KDOT last week because he top 5 rates in routes, top 5 numbers in routes run at tight end. He went out and played 100% of the offensive snaps last week. A little bit less so this week, knowing kind of the tendencies of the Tennessee Titans defense. They're built kind of inside out. So the middle of the field is kind of a little bit more crowded than on the perimeter for guys like Mike Evans. So that's kind of my read on this game.
Got it. But let's move forward to the next one, which we'll probably be spending some time talking about. It's a game that I picked. Houston is traveling to Cincy to take on the Bengals. Obviously, CJ Stroud just put up the stellar performance. For starters, I love Dalton Schultz in this matchup. And there's multiple reasons, but to kick it off, George Kittle went for over 100 yards in the same scheme that the Texans like to run, because Bobby Slow came from obviously Shanahan. He has a lot of Shanahan personalities. And on top of it, the Bengals are the worst team at defending inline tight ends this season. Dalton Schultz is an inline tight end for this group. And we now kind of have Nico Collins, who hasn't practiced in back-to-back days. And if Nico Collins is out, so then you have Dalton Schultz, Tank Dell, and most likely Noah Brown. I don't think the Bengals are going to just now key in more on Dalton Schultz. I think their inside problems is the fact that they lost Jesse Bates and Von Bell and new safeties, new scheme. It's taking some time for them to be able to cover these inline tight ends. And CJ Stroud is going to be able to find him. This isn't a spot for me to love CJ Stroud because the Bengals just don't really blitz that much. And that's something that drives CJ Stroud's big plays. His yards per attempt against the blitz this year is the highest amongst all quarterbacks in the league. It's the only one over 9. Actually, he's in the 10 range. And since he just doesn't really blitz, so the way that I'm approaching this is stacking Joe Burrow because of the obvious value that's opened up without T. Higgins, getting Jamar Chase because you just don't play Joe Burrow without Jamar Chase, without T. Higgins there. And then playing with the idea of some of those 3K receivers, Irwin, Iavosas, and the run back for me is Dalton Schultz. It's a weird one to run back in this matchup, but I do believe that Dalton Schultz is a guy that, like, Joe Burrow blows him out or puts up a ton of points. Dalton Schultz is just getting reception after reception, just eating from a PPR perspective. I don't think he carries what's this word I want to use? I don't think he carries this, massive ceiling, but I do believe at the tight end position with the way that it's kind of structured and laid out this weekend, I don't think he's going to get played much. And if he's not getting played much, it's a unique run back in this matchup. I don't even mind if Dameon Pierce sits out again, Devin Singletary. I know how bad the Texans have been at running the football. Bengals have struggled as a run defense here and there, and Sam Hubbard's out, so defensive line is going to be a little bit different this weekend. Sam Hubbard is a big time piece of their defensive line. You can kind of run away from Trey Hendrickson in this one. So for me, stacking Joe Burrow, and I'm getting Jamar Chase with one of the 3K receivers, and then Dalton Schultz is a perfect run back for me. Fine with Devin Singletary. I do not like Tank Dell in this matchup. I know that Nico Collins is out, and I know that the idea is going to be, well, targets got to go somewhere. I love Tank Dell as a player. I think this scheme with Lou and Arumo and the way he's going to rotate and the way he's going to do things is going to kind of keep CJ Stroud off balance. And I think this is the first time in his rookie year that it's going to really confuse him and kind of generate these, like, you don't know where he's throwing the ball type of situations. He's going to be more hesitant, and Trey Hendrickson is a menace. And I think he's going to get some pressure while rushing 4 and playing 7 in coverage. That's my personal read of the game. Hilo, how do you feel about this one?
Yeah, I'm looking at the defensive tendencies from Lou Anarumo in this one, and he's played more man coverage this year than he has in the past, and I think that's a function of those 2 safeties that you mentioned, Von Bell, and I forgot the other guy.
Jesse Bates left.
Thank you, Jesse Bates. Yeah. Leaving town, I'm obviously chasing some money a little bit and being paid according to how they have performed, which is a good thing. But they're no longer, and I think that has led to, this is a team that has been in man coverage, the 11th highest rate in the league this year. That was unheard of in previous seasons under Lou Anarumo. That's important because both Nico Collins and Tank Dell are top 10 in fantasy points per route run against man coverage this season. You remove Nico Collins, who just reported he did not practice. We just got that right before coming on air, and it's looking highly unlikely that he's going to play. But also, oh, by the way, Dameon Pierce looks highly unlikely to play after not practicing this week at all. So why is that important? Because Bobby Slowick is a guy who has been kind of Jekyll and Hyde this season in his play calling tendencies. He started the season with a very, very, over the first 4 weeks, very, very forward leaning, looking to attack and exploit opposing defenses. Then over the subsequent 4 games, or I guess 4 weeks, he was not that. He had the highest first down rush rate in the entire league. That led to this team having the highest second and third down and long situations to go because over that time frame, because they are so ineffective at running the football. Then Dameon Pierce missed last week, and they had 19 first down pass attempts against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. All that CJ Stroud did on those 19 pass attempts is throw for over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. Insane. So all that to say, because Dameon Pierce is out, because Lou Anarumo has been running higher rates of man coverage, and because now we have a condensed target tree, I'm totally fine going Tank Dell and Dalton Schultz. I'm totally fine. We should, even if Robert Woods comes back, we should now see Noah Brown on the field because Nico Collins is not going to be. Noah Brown has about a 55% slot snap rate. So 55% of his snaps are coming out of the slot. Robert Woods could influence that and force him to the perimeter at a higher rate. But Noah Brown is very clearly the guy that this team trusts if one of those top 3 options are not on the field, and it looks like Nico won't be. So, I mean, Noah Brown's priced at only $3,700. He is viable, but I'm primarily interested in a severely underpriced Tank Dell for how he has performed. And I agree with you, Dalton Schultz here at only $4,900. But I mean, big picture, I could build a roster with all but like 1 or 2 pieces from this game and still not feel overexposed, just based on how value is shaping up. I mean, you could run Joe Burrow plus Jamar Chase plus Trenton Irwin, who played 76% of the offensive snaps when T. Higgins missed in week 5, and bring it back with like Tank Dell and Dalton Schultz. You could even add Joe Mixon in because he's second in the league in running back opportunity share. So there's a lot of ways that you could go, and the prices don't necessarily match the expected involvement here.
The only pushback I have on looking at last week's play calling versus this upcoming week is Cincinnati's run defense is just significantly different than Tampa Bay's. And
second worst in the league.
It feels like he's one of those guys that Tampa Bay is like, oh, we're just going to throw it. Like, we're going to go out, we're going to throw it. And Tampa Bay also is like, hey, we're going to live in cover 3, man. You love throwing against that? You love throwing against cover 3 while we're blitzing? Cool, man. We're going to do this for you. And it's like, Cincinnati, Lou Anarumo is like, what do you like? No, you're not getting that. Like, Lou Anarumo, when they played the Chiefs in that game where they came back, they went to the Super Bowl that year, they ended up going in the first half, going down 21 points, and obviously coming back, and he went and rushed 3 for the entire half against Patrick Mahomes. Played 8 in coverage. They lose Tyreek Hill. How does he approach him this year? He's like, these receivers aren't it. He's playing cover 1 man, and he is coming after him and containing him. And in this spot against CJ Stroud, I think he's just going to go away from what Stroud wants, which is a lot of cover 3. I think he's going to go more too high. He's going to force Slowick and like the idea of, hey, when you give it to Devin Singletary, it's a win for our defense. And that's where it's going to be for me, like the way I approach it. I don't mind Tank Dell. I think he's going to be too popular. And there's a guy at his price that I love this weekend that I will get into when we talk about favorite values. But let's move forward to the next game. You got 49ers traveling to Jacksonville. We got 2 Florida games on this slate that aren't the Dolphins. I'm sure you're not worried about the heat. You know, heat index a little high here. I don't know if you want to fade any of these games because the hydration might be bad over there. But not letting you live that one down.
Give it, baby. I'll take it. Give it.
Dolphins scored 70 that week. But anyways, that's just, oh man, that was one of the takes that I was like, did you just say that? I don't know, Kyle, you scare me sometimes. Tell me what you like about the 49ers and Jaguars, and I have a feeling it's Brock Purdy.
I mean, I'm not in love with Brock Purdy, but Brock Purdy is complete. I mean, this is still a team that at a high frequency, they're scoring 30 points with Brock Purdy under center. They're getting Deebo Samuel back. There's a lot to like about Brock Purdy. My favorite 2 plays from this game are Christian McCaffrey, who 17 weeks in a row.
Who is he?
He's tough to get. Have you heard of this guy? This Christian McCaffrey guy? Scored a touchdown 17 weeks in a row, guy. He has both a passing or a receiving and a rushing score in 3 games this season. We look at the matchup against Jacksonville Jaguars. They're top 5 in most metrics against the run, but they've allowed the most running back receptions this season. That could be a little bit influenced, obviously, or we could see a little bit of influence on Christian McCaffrey's recent receiving production. We could see it take a little bit of dip here with Deebo Samuel coming back. But we know this team can win kind of any way that they want to. And we know that they're have a good chance of scoring 30 plus points, which is important because for you math majors out there, that's 4 touchdowns. And because Christian McCaffrey has he has 44 red zone opportunities this season, and he leads the league in goal line carries. So this is a guy that when they get in the red zone, he's going to be involved, and I like that for the running backs that I'm playing on a slate. The other guy, and I think this is the guy who you were going to. So I hope I'm not stealing too much thunder, but it's Calvin Ridley that is priced near Tank Dell this week. Is that the guy that you were alluding to, or no?
No, he's not.
Okay.
He's not a part of the games we're talking about. But Calvin is someone that
Okay.
I am in love with as well. Just need Jay Jones back. Just that's it. That's
he ain't playing. He ain't playing.
He's not playing. That's
Nope.
a big thing. That's a big thing to my Calvin Ridley love. But I'll let you go. Go for it.
Yeah. So on the opposite side, we have a San Francisco defense similar to Lou Anarumo that is playing less zone coverage than they have in the past. That's important because they are top 5 in almost every defensive metric that you look at when in zone coverage, but they're like mediocre at best when in man coverage, and they're getting burned on the perimeter. So that's why I said Calvin Ridley is probably the kind of go-to-ish guy in this spot. Coming off of a 10 target game, like he could get there. He's not like a high confidence play for me. He's a guy that, he's a guy that can do some damage in this spot. And I say that because where we want to be attacking this 49ers defense is on the perimeter. The best player from a targets per route run perspective for the Jacksonville Jaguars against man coverage this season is actually Christian Kirk at 25.5% targets per route run. They have not seen a ton of man coverage, though, this season. And when we say that, like, the 49ers are running more man coverage this year than they have in the past, they're still in zone at 80% clip. So they're still running a high rate of zone, but they're running more man than we have seen. And I think that's because they've sunk a ton of salary and a ton of the dollary dues into their defensive line and their linebacking core, and they just have fallen off a bit on the perimeter coverage. But Christian Kirk is totally fine in this spot. Calvin Ridley, totally fine in this spot. But Christian McCaffrey and to a lesser extent Calvin Ridley are extremely, extremely intriguing to me.
Yeah, I just looking more into it as you were going about it. I actually do still agree with the Calvin Ridley play. From the standpoint of so with the reason why I was hesitant without Zay Jones is because of the fact that he gets put in this just low percentage of target type like outcome where he's playing 38 to 40% of his routes are 7 to 9s. He clears the field for Kirk and Evan Ingram to kind of work underneath. And I was like, wait a minute, let me see what receivers and kind of how they've done it. And it's all been down the field for the most part. Yeah. Puka's the only one that was just like dink and dunk and operated in that way. But I don't see that being the case with this Jaguars team. I think they're going to try to with Kirk and Evan Ingram. But I think Greenlaw and Fred Warner will just kind of be teeing off on Kirk and Evan Ingram in this one. So it's kind of like you're going to have to beat me with a Jordan Addison, where Jordan Addison had under 10% of his routes be 1 to 3, which is your slant, flat, curl, comeback type routes. Basically, his whole route tree was deep. And obviously, one of those touchdowns was a big one. He just kind of ripped from the corner. So Calvin operates in that style of build. It's just going to be about Trevor. How's that knee holding up? Can he really push the ball down the field? I do not like Travis Etienne at all in this one. This feels like this defensive line, like upgrading to Chase Young, getting that bye week to get like refreshed. I think their defensive line and is going to control that area of the field. Jaguars are going to try to get it to Etienne. Obviously, he's going to get a ton of touches. Don't see an effective group out of him. I don't like to pay for that 7,100 price tag with some of the other running backs that are around there. But other than that, I don't have much else to add to this game. Do you have anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to downplay the fact that Travis Etienne has 7 touchdowns in his last 4 games played.
Yep.
So there's something to be said there. And this is a guy who is first or second in pretty much all volume metrics, whether it's through the air, whether it's snap rate, whether it's on the ground. What I mentioned, the 44 red zone opportunities for Christian McCaffrey. I believe I looked at it this morning. I believe Travis Etienne is at 16 red zone opportunities with only the 1 touchdown coming from inside the 5. They've brought Tank Bigsby in for whatever reason. He is the bigger body guy. When they get inside the 5-yard line for those rushing attempts, but they still have a high red zone pass rate as well. The fact that Travis Etienne, I mean, this is a guy, 6 targets, 5 targets, 3, 5, 3 over the last 5 games. Every game he's seen 3 or more targets. So that lessens the need to score multiple touchdowns. But still, it's going to be hard for him to surpass 100 yards. I think his price is fine for his expectations, his range of outcomes here. When we talk about his price hasn't moved. His price has not moved all season. He started the season at 6,900. Every single game he's been priced between 6,900 and 7,200. So that tells me, because the production has been there, that tells me that he's not being owned. He does not garner ownership, which is a potential leverage spot, I think, on the slate. I think it's fine.
Yeah, I do. And from the 49ers perspective, I mean, Chris McCaffrey, you can't really go wrong with him. He's obviously just a monster. He continues to score. He's really safe. I also don't think you can go wrong with either Debo or Ayuk in this one. Both of them can get over that 100 yards. It's just a matter of who Kyle Shanahan wants to play. Tyson Campbell and Andre Sisco are coming back, which is a boost to the Jaguars secondary. But still, their secondary is beatable. We saw Gabe Davis and Diggs go for over 100 in London. We saw Michael Pittman get 97 in a touchdown with Tyson Campbell there. And then they played him a second time, and he went 9 for 109. Like, we've seen some big games. Tank Dell had 145 in a touchdown. One of them was like a 65-yard touchdown that it was kind of a broken play, but it was a drag route that he took. So it was obviously Deebo Samuel could be that type of guy in this one. Debo's fully healthy. I'm treating him like he's fully healthy. I'm not playing any games with him. And I think obviously the 49ers, that bye week came at a great time with what they were dealing with. And then the upgrade of Chase Young, man, that was just, oh, that's so menacing. I'm terrified.
Less than Montez Sweat.
Yeah, speaking of Chase Young, the next game we're going to, Washington is traveling to Seattle. This is my favorite quarterback of the week as of Friday. Geno Smith. This is the Geno Smith game to like get rid of all of the bad that's happened in the beginning of the season and get right, get moving, get going. And it starts with DK Metcalf and then it ends with Tyler Lockett. JSN obviously has had these bigger weeks in recent weeks. Last week's game, I don't really care about because they just got absolutely boat raced. They were getting blown out. It was kind of the way that Detroit played the Baltimore Ravens, and you saw Jameson Williams get all these targets, and it's like, oh, he's going to get these downfield targets going forward. It's like, I don't think that's the case. This is a spot where we know what Washington struggles with. They struggle with the 9 route. They struggle with down the field stuff. I'm treating Seattle the way that I would treat the Eagles against the Commanders. You have AJ Brown be the DK Metcalf, the guy that's down the field, gets it going, and then Tyler Lockett operate as Devonta, the smooth guy, the person who somehow just quietly has like 90 yards receiving in the game because he just operates and finds good spots. They have no problems putting Forbes on AJ Brown. I don't think they're going to have issues putting Forbes on DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf is twice the size of Emmanuel Forbes, and if Geno Smith does not target him on the sidelines on that play, I think DK Metcalf's going to rip off his helmet. Like, I think DK is sick of like not getting these down the field looks. Against the Bengals, there were 3 plays where he was wide open. Him and Cam Taylor-Britt were getting at it. I think this is a spot where DK dominates this matchup. And just on the 9 route specifically, this season, 75% of Geno's targets on this route have gone to DK or Tyler Lockett. So it's simple to pair them. It's simple to stack them that way. And as far as the run back, I don't think you need to run it back on this slate. I think that these two can kind of have this big game without necessarily Washington pushing them. And with how the other games are kind of shaping out, it's a spot where if you want to run it back, it's McLaurin or Dotson. You don't really think about it. And with the other games, there's just so many mini stacks that I want to be pairing with this so I can kind of get to the Jamar Chase type build or get to some of these other great plays throughout the slate. How are you feeling about this one?
I got a question for you before we jump into that. What do you make of JSN's snap rate last week and Shane Waldron's transition to more 11 personnel? Was that purely based on the matchup and the game environment, or do you think that we're going to see more 11 moving forward? Because, I mean, JSN saw 82% snap rate last week.
Yeah, no, we should see more 11 going forward because I think that's what they wanted to do going into the season. But then their left tackle and right tackle got hurt, and then they got their left tackle back. But I also think that it was a bit skewed just because of the game. Like, I think if they get a lead on teams, if they get up to if they're up 14 in this game against Washington early on, you're gonna see 12 because they win 11. How did the run game look? Like, I think Pete Carroll's going to look at that and be like, I don't know if I want to run at 11 because these guys run better with two tight ends on the field, and we have good tight ends in his eyes for some reason. They just truly want to play
Colby
these guys.
Parkinson.
Yeah, because again, JSN has seen an uptick in snaps, and I think JSN is going to kind of be a guy that comes down the stretch. I can't see him playing more than 60% this week. Like, I think he hovers around that because of the game script. I think if it's a close competitive game and we're going back and forth and stuff, like if they got to play Cincy again, that's what he would do. Like against Cincy, he had 81% of the routes. He had a 72% snap share. That's kind of how I would be approaching him.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that he played at most 59% of the snaps through the first 4 weeks of the season. They have their early bye in week 5, and he comes out and he's played 72%, 63, 66, and 82. I don't know, man. I feel like I'm drawn to JSN this week for some reason.
He just doesn't run deep routes, and that's what you want against Washington. Like,
yeah.
And he also, like, looking at, again, I know that we both said that, the projections right now don't matter. I don't think people are getting to DK at 68.
Yeah, that's fair.
I just don't. I think that the field is going to go down to your, DeAndre Hopkins for what Tampa Bay just had happen. Obviously, Tank Dell is going to massively boost up, and then amon-ra and Jamar Chase, both of them are going to go even higher than what they're projected right now. It's going to be one of those games where we're not battling how popular they are. And if you told me ceiling wise, like, yeah, JSN is cheap. JSN is 4,100. JSN is an easy person to pair here. I think if you're double stacking Geno no matter what you're doing, you could play JSN over Lockett. I am just not playing a JSN Tower Lockett Geno stack. I want DK a part of it because DK brings that ceiling for Geno. So
I respect it. I just had that. Yes. Wanted to see how you were seeing JSN particularly because you hadn't mentioned him.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer Lockett and Metcalf. It's kind of because, again, 9 routes. If JSN ends up running these like deep crossers because he's started to, they haven't targeted him a lot.
Yeah.
Those will be huge for me to be like, okay, maybe I want to get more of him. I'm gonna probably watch back that Baltimore film for the first quarter. I don't remember when the game got out of hand, but I want to see his route tree. I might even chart, to be honest, just so I can have more confirmation on the way that I feel, because I could see that he obviously ran more deeper routes this past weekend. His ADOT was still 6.5, and that just heartbreaking. But let's go forward. Let's talk about the game with the highest over-under on slate. The game that has a lot of popularity. The Detroit Lions are taking on the Los Angeles Chargers. I am in love with amon-ra St. Brown. I don't know how I'm going to get away from him this weekend. I know his price. It's a scary one for a guy that like is a possession guy, but the Chargers right now have not defended balanced formations, 2x2 sets. The Lions, when they go 2-2, Amon-Ra is getting targeted on 45% of his routes. We know the run game is going to threaten the Chargers enough so that they're going to have to react to this play action. We know Amon-Ra is going to sneak behind these linebackers on these crossing routes, and it's a perfect game for him. I don't know if I'm going to go Goff yet, but if I do, it has to be a JMO or Josh Reynolds double stack. I don't think I want to go with Laporta in this matchup. And it's nothing against Laporta specifically. It's just I think that Goff needs that big play, that big long touchdown to the receiver, because I also think that that opens up everything for Amon-Ra. And if JMO or Josh Reynolds is getting going, then everything is just kind of clicking for Detroit. We're also in a dome. Amon-Ra also LA kid, round those, went to USC. So now we're getting him in LA, which is a big deal there. But and then the run back for me, I mean, Keenan Allen and Eckler are the only guys on the Chargers that I have a lot of love for. They're the only ones that seem to produce. I don't think that Josh Palmer, is Josh Palmer even playing? I don't remember if I
Probably not. It's looking like probably not.
Yeah. So if also DPJ is a fun little one. I know that that's terrifying, but they did trade for him. They did show enough love into him that he might get out there and run deep. Who knows? I don't know how you feel about DPJ. I don't know if he's going to be active, but I think a deep play to one of those guys has to be a part of your Jared Goff thought process. Might be more of an afternoon only play with DPJ. Let me get that straight away. Like that's more of an afternoon only, and not really necessarily, we're not going to that on the main slate with some of the other 3K options that have become available. But again, Keenan and Eckler are the only ones that you really want to have a lot of interest in, and they're the ones that kind of bring back in this game. And it's not a spot to get cute. How do you feel?
Yeah, so my overall thoughts on this game, I'll keep it quick because I know we're running up on time here. My overall thoughts on this game is it's probably my least favorite game environment, even though it carries the top overall game total on the slate. It's probably my least favorite game environment of the 5 that we've talked about today.
Okay.
The reason for that is the Chargers with Joshua Palmer out, and the most recent reports are no timetable for his return. So with Josh Palmer out, Jalen Guyton has never been able to command targets. He runs empty routes. He runs routes, but they're empty downfield routes, trying to open things up for Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler down the middle of the field. In this matchup, against a very, very good Detroit Lions defense they rank top 5 in most metrics against the run. So Austin Eckler is not going to see more than 15, 16 carries anyway, but the Chargers are likely to struggle to generate some explosive plays here. Is it going to happen through Keenan Allen? I mean, maybe once per game, potentially he sees a 20+ yard reception. It's not likely to happen through Austin Eckler with the coverage now that the Lions have in the linebacking core, and their safeties are improved. So to me, the Chargers are highly unlikely to push the Lions here. From an explosive play standpoint, they're likely going to have to sustain drives, march the field. That lowers the expected play volume for the Lions. It just kind of all shapes up like, yeah, Amon-Ra St. Brown is one of the top on-paper plays on the slate, but is he going to see 12, 15 targets? Probably not in this spot. I think he's more likely to be in the 8 to 10 range, which means he's going to have to score 2 touchdowns to return value on his price. Can that happen in this spot? For sure. It's just not the likeliest scenario. So like when I'm sitting there comparing how do I spend my salary on the slate, is it Amon-Ra St. Brown, or is it Jamar Chase? Is it Christian McCaffrey? CeeDee Lamb even maybe. You mentioned DK Metcalf. To me, those other options are stronger from a likeliest scenario standpoint. Can this game develop into something that you had to have Amon-Ra St. Brown? Most definitely. But in order for that to be the case, you're going to have to play Amon-Ra St. Brown with either Keenan Allen or Austin Eckler. And now we're talking about 2 players sinking significant salary on your roster. So it becomes very hard to build around that. So that's just kind of my take on it. I'd rather go in those other spots. Amon-Ra St. Brown, very clearly a top 5, like on paper play, just removing everything else in a vacuum. To me, from a game theory standpoint, I just can build a more comfortable all-around roster because I think if you're playing Amon-Ra, you have to tie him to either Keenan Allen or Austin Eckler.
That's fair. I agree with that take that well, that's fair the way you approach it. I mean, again, Amon-Ra, for me, like if Goff throws the ball 28 to 30 times, I see Amon-Ra getting 12 targets. And that's a significant ask. It's just way that I think the Detroit Lions are going to beat them is through him. And it's totally fine to go elsewhere. Obviously, I think it's more of a spot. I mean, I guess it's more of a spot if it's like you have 84 and you for whatever reason, you just can't find that 200 in salary to get to Chase. Like, I'm playing Amon-Ra. I mean, heck, even if it's 85 and you're sitting there, CeeDee Lamb or Amon-Ra St. Brown, playing Amon-Ra over CeeDee Lamb against the Giants because I think Deonte Banks is actually going to hold him in check. Wild as that sounds, Deonte Banks has actually just really impressed me as a corner this year. And I think the Cowboys are just I think the Cowboys have to treat this game like, hey, CD, you've gotten 30, 40 targets in the last 3 games. Let's just let's get other things. Like, if we're losing, we'll go to you. But, like, let's get Pollard some touches. Let's get Brandon Cooks a little.
I just threw up a little in my mouth.
No, outside touches, not inside touches.
Right? That's totally different.
That's way different. Yeah. Totally. But anyways, let's go and give our favorite slate breaker on today or this weekend slate. Who do you have as your slate breaker?
My slate breaker is Joe Burrow. And I think that a lot is pointing to why that is the case here. I mean, we look at like Houston. Houston hasn't given up touchdowns to wide receivers, and they've given up like 2 touchdowns to wide receivers this season, but they've still been bottom 5 in the league in passing yards per game allowed. They're not really making it so that teams can't pass on them. Their run game or their run defense is vastly improved to where it was last season. They're top 5 in most run metrics, defensive metrics against the run. Joe Burrow and the Bengals, we can now see that like his calf is much better. They're running like 20-25% play action because he's able to not have to, or he's able to run plays under center and not have to be in gun or pistol the entire game. So they're able to run more play action. They lead the league in pass rate over expectation over the last month of play. And now we're getting a spot where Joe Burrow, he becomes so much easier to stack as well. So if Joe Burrow succeeds, like, yes, it's probably going to involve Jamar Chase, but also like Joe Mixon is in that discussion as a stacking viable partner. Trenton Irwin, probably not the tight ends. Yeah, they were involved more, but they're still running extreme rates of 11 personnel. Trenton Irwin, Andre Yosivas has been more involved in the red zone. He's maybe a potential punt pivot off of a guy like Trenton Irwin. So there's a lot to like, and he's my slate breaker because if he succeeds, he's very, very likely to bring in so many more other pieces as well.
That's a good slate breaker. I have no problem with that. I am going to DK Metcalf. I talked about him highly before. We saw DJ Moore, 52, AJ Brown, 42, AJ Brown, 37, Drake London, 25 against this Washington defense without a receiving touchdown. Gino and obviously DK have not had that explosive game yet. I think it's coming this weekend, and he is not popular. It is something that I am very, very into. That's on that late slate. I know more. I mean, people are going to be playing Amon-Ra, and I love Amon-Ra, but again, DK Metcalf at his price, I think he can put up that 30 to 40 point output, and nobody's going to be getting to him as of right now. Especially, I mean, you don't have to play him with Geno either. Like, you can get your Joe Burrows, you can get your cheap, Joe Burrow stack going, and then have that Geno or DK Metcalf one-off waiting on that late slate. So, next one, favorite value on the slate, Hilo. Who is your favorite value?
I'm actually going to JSN because the price 4,100. Yeah, I think, and It's a little bit of leverage component. I don't think you need to leverage off of DK Metcalf because he's not going to have ownership. But he's leverage off of the like bare minimum salary type guys. So you could go to maybe Nick Westbrook-Akine in that same discussion, priced at 3,400 over the kind of min salary value potential pieces on the slate that are opening up because of injuries. So yeah, we'll go both of those guys, JSN and Nick Westbrook-Akine, because they're going to open up a lot for you, and they do have the ceiling to return like a legitimate like 25 to 27 point game here if they're able to go over 100 yard and find the end zone, so which is within their range of outcomes. It's very important when we're talking about potential like value pieces. They still have to have the ceiling for us, because we can't just be like, oh, JSN scored 13 points, which he's done. Like, he's hit 3 to 4x salary multiplier each of the last 3 weeks. In GPPs, that doesn't really matter. We need him to put up like a raw points 25 pointer to be able to return value for us in a roster.
So I alluded to this during the show. I said that there was a player at that same price as Tank Dell that I like more than Tank Dell, and it's gonna sound gross, but Drake London.
Deontay? Oh, Drake. Oh, so
he's got a 43% target share on out wide targets this year for the Falcons. When you look at just the game log of this, Arizona secondary, which again, it's not a pretty one, they're giving up almost 10 yards per attempt to out wide receivers. A lot of the receivers that have beaten them have been out wide, and obviously it's Taylor Heinicke. It's not a pretty football, but when you're looking at, okay, well, who do I go after or off of Tank Dell? Like, we've seen Taylor Heinicke just target dudes, and then once he figures out like this guy's catching the ball, this guy's getting targets. Like, we watched it in Washington. We watched Terry McLaurin all of a sudden be good at football when Taylor Heinicke was just back there, just like, I'm targeting him, I'm going at him. So for me, it's Drake London at his price. It's not a pretty play, but again, if you're playing a lot of the popular plays on the weekend, I think I would rather go to a Drake London at 5,500 to help myself get unique, and he still carries the upside. Obviously, it's a scary one, but it's someone that data is pointing me to, and I believe in the matchup against this Arizona defense. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, man, that was fun.
So be sure to tune in next week to the Cover 5 show. Be sure to check out the articles coming out Saturday, where we will drop our top plays, my GPP, and Hilo's, some of the chalk that he's going after, how he's approaching it, how he's going to handle it. Obviously, he's 100%ing Trent Irwin this weekend, but that is all we've got for the Cover 5 show. See you guys next week.